actual ranking of all my Colourpop palettes, I just wanted to mention that I will not be including 2 palettes that I have picked up from Colourpop this year because I did film this ranking back in like, I think January. So it's been like a month or so since I filmed it, or maybe it was like the end of January, but I had not received these palettes yet when I filmed the ranking. And also I usually do a ranking once a year of all my Colourpop palettes in my collection from like the previous year of all the palettes that I picked up in the previous year. So it's like, if I didn't get the palettes in 2022, then they're not going to be included in the ranking, unless I had gotten a palette in like January and I was able to try it out fully for you guys. 99% of the time, I'm pretty good at ranking Colourpop palettes at this point because I know the formula, but I still want to try out the palettes for you as much as possible and give you guys a true ranking of what my absolute favorites are and what I think aren't really that great. So the 2 palettes I've gotten recently is the Flirty Talk palette, so I won't be including this one. I haven't even hauled this yet, but I do have a couple looks with this palette on my channel, so I think it's a good pink palette, but this will be included in my halfway through the year ranking of all the palettes I've tried in 2023 so far. So that's when this palette will make an appearance in my rankings. I think you guys know this at this point for whoever watches my videos, but usually I get more views with my ranking videos. And then the other one is the most recent palette, and that is the Snow White palette. So this one I won't be including as well. But I will tell you that I think both of these palettes are really good formula-wise. I do think the formula is really good across the board in both of these. I don't really have many problems at all with the blending or the shimmers. They're really, really good. So, but again, I haven't even hauled this one yet, and this is my most recent Colourpop palette to my collection. So these 2 will not be included. But and there are some that are like really, really old at this point that I really just can't use anymore because they're just too old. So I also mentioned in the beginning that there were like 2 older palettes that I wouldn't be including. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this and let's get into it. Okay, so hey there guys, so today's video is going to be ranking all the Colourpop palettes in my collection. I usually do this every year around the beginning of the year or towards the end of the year, depending on how many palettes I tried the previous year. I like including all of the palettes that I had tried before this to rank them all for you guys, because you guys know I'm a Colourpop fanatic. I try the most palettes from Colourpop. I have the most palettes from Colourpop in my collection. I have over 30 palettes from Colourpop in my collection, and I'm going to tell you guys the ones that I don't love and the ones that are my top picks and favorites, because I like sharing with you guys which ones I think are worth the money. I don't think you guys will be surprised by my number 1 pick though, but we're not going to waste any time and we're going to jump right into it. First off, I'm just going to tell you and mention the ones that I'm not really ranking because I don't use these. I just want to mention them because I'm either going to be decluttering them, or they're just too old, or I just use them for display purposes. So one is the Colourpop Dream Street and Kathleen Lights palette. You cannot get this palette anymore. The only palette that I'm including from her is the actually I have one other palette here that I'm forgetting already. I don't even know where it is. Hold on. Sorry. So 2 I'm not going to be including is the Colourpop Dream Street palette. You cannot get this palette anymore. But just so you know, this has been one of my favorites for a long time. And then also the Zodiac palette from Kathleen Lights as well. We're going down a little bit of memory lane right now. I did use this a ton as well. I just don't use this palette anymore because again, it is too old in my collection, but this one I wasn't ever as crazy about, or I was never as crazy about as the Dream Street palette. The Dream Street palette I definitely liked a lot more. And then I have the Valentine's Day Secret Admirer 9-pan palette that they came out with last year. I did not like this palette, so I'm not going to be including it in this ranking. I am going to be selling it on my Poshmark, so this is what it looks like. It's a cute little palette, but honestly, I don't really like the formula in this one. I didn't think it was anything to write home about. I actually ordered the Valentine's Day palette that came out this year, so I think that that palette is a lot prettier, and it's actually already sold out. So I also have two other older 9 pans that I have been meaning to try to give to one of my friends, and that is the Main Squeeze palette and the Honey palette. I'm just gonna show these real quick. I did use these a lot in the past, and one of my other friends is actually a pretty big collector of Colourpop. I got her pretty into it, and she really likes the 9 pan, so this is the Main Squeeze palette. This was a good palette, but honestly the mattes in here are very, very dry, so it's not my absolute favorite. And then the other one, of course, is the Honey, which is a really pretty yellow palette. This is a good yellow palette for if you want to get something affordable. I like this palette, but I'm not in love with it because I wish it had like a deeper mustardy matte in here, because this is like the deepest you can go is this color, and it is a good color, but I just wish you could build a little bit more depth and dimension with that. So those are two other older palettes. And then the last two I'm going to be mentioning before we get into the official ranking. I want to rank everything in this video, so it's not going to be too long. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. Is the Tinkerbell palette. I'm going to be decluttering this one as well. I have never been crazy about this one. Honestly, this has been my least favorite Disney palette that they came out with. I just have no desire to reach for this palette, you guys. I know that this has been a lot of people's favorite, but I just don't like it. I just have tried to like it. I like the shimmers in here, but it's the fact that and I love the packaging and it's so pretty, and I was struggling to see what I wanted to do with this palette for so long, but since I've literally had no desire to reach for this palette in so long, I'm going to declutter it. I just don't think that the matte formula is that great in here, and also it's just really, I don't even display it. I just don't really like it enough, so I'm just going to get rid of it. And then the last one is the Bambi little 5 pan. I've talked about this so much as to why I actually bought this palette, but honestly, I only use this for display purposes. It's not like I haven't used it. I've used it a couple of times, and it's just okay. It's honestly really not that they're like best quality. You can only really get one look out of this, but I think it's so cute, and I love the packaging. Honestly, I'm only keeping it for the packaging. But the value of this palette is also terrible. You can get so many different 9 pan palettes from Colourpop for such a better price. So this one is honestly not worth it to me price-wise, but it's just so cute that I just can't get rid of it. I don't know why. All right, so now let's jump into the official ranking of all the palettes that are currently in my collection and that I use when I can, or I'm still using newer palettes that I had added from Colourpop. But the last most recent palette I added to my collection from Colourpop is the Not a Box of Chocolates palette. So I can give a full review of that in this video. So we're just going to start out with ranking all the palettes, and I believe there are 28 palettes here. Hopefully that's the number because I've counted them twice. I'm gonna count them one more time. Okay guys, so it's not 28, it's 29, but let's make it 30 and just rank the Bambi palette as 30 because it just makes me happier to have 30 palettes in my collection than 29, because I like having an even number of palettes from certain brands because I'm crazy like that. Like, that makes me a little bit OCD. So since I have this on my shelf, we're just going to rank it as number 30, but just telling you guys I don't really like this palette that much. All right, number 29 is the Powerpuff Girls palette. I've talked about this palette a lot, that I really just don't love the color story of this. I love the theme. I just don't really reach for this palette. Honestly, I'll never get rid of it though because I am such a Powerpuff Girls fan. I grew up on the Powerpuff Girls, so honestly, this really has a nostalgic purpose for me, not as much as, oh, I'm going to use this palette all the time, because I really don't. Honestly, I really only used it when it first came out. I will swatch my favorite shade though. What is my favorite shade in this palette? I really like this Frenemy shade. I don't really have a super favorite shade in this palette because honestly none of them really stood out to me, but this is a really pretty like super warm tone shimmer, and I love those kind of colors, but there's really just no depth and dimension that you can build in this palette, and I felt like I always would have to reach into something else. The mattes are good in here and the shimmers are pretty, but honestly there's like no depth and dimension to really write home about in this palette that really like gives me the like depth that I'm looking for when I use this. So unfortunately, theme is 100% amazing, but just the color story really was just not the best for me. So that's why it's towards the bottom. Not saying I don't like it, but I'm just saying out of all the other palettes that I'm ranking, I definitely use all the other ones a lot more. Okay, number 28 is the Frozen 2 Elsa palette. And the reason why this one is much lower is because it's just not really like my kind of color story. There's nothing wrong with the formula of this one. It is pretty. The color story is unique. And the only reason why I love this palette is because it is Frozen. I am a Disney fanatic. As you guys can see, there's going to be a lot of Disney palettes in this video. But as far as color story goes, it's just not my absolute favorite. My favorite shade in the palette is Northern Lights. This is a really pretty Super Shock shade. It's very multi-dimensional. It's like a really pretty like purpley greenish taupey color. It's gorgeous. So I really do like the shimmers in here. But as far as the matte selection goes, this blue isn't that great, but it's a cute little palette. And again, since it's Frozen, it's not going anywhere. I don't really use it anymore, but again, it's a cute little palette. So that one is number 28. Number 27, I'm kind of surprised this one's ranking so low, but honestly, I don't really reach for it as much anymore. But I do really like the formula in this one, and that is the Lizzie McGuire palette. And the reason why this one, again, is ranking lower is just because I don't really use it anymore. But again, I would never get rid of this palette because it is Lizzie McGuire, and I grew up on Lizzie McGuire. Again, I wish that this had a little bit more of deepening shades in here, but I do think you can deepen up more with this palette than the Powerpuff Girls palette. I was about to say Powder Puff. 30, 29, 28. Yes, this is 27. Because you have this purple and this pink, and these shades are really, really pretty. I actually really like the formula of this palette. The only dud shade in this palette is this lime green. Like I said, in the Frozen 2 palette, it's that blue shade. I don't think that shade is that great. In this palette, this green doesn't really build up that great, but all the other shades are really beautiful. And my favorite shade in this palette, I think, is Dear Diary. I love Bye-Bye too. Oh my god. This is such a gorgeous, like, champagne-y color. They're really, really pretty. The shimmers in here are really stunning. But I think since these palettes have come out, Colourpop has even improved their formula even more as far as their shimmer shades go. So this one is number 27. Again, I'll never get rid of it because it is Lizzie McGuire. I grew up on Lizzie McGuire and I freaking loved that show. I watched it all the time. As soon as I came home from school, I would turn it on, and I love Hilary Duff, and Lizzie McGuire is amazing. Okay, number 25. You guys are probably going to be shocked at how low this palette is ranking. Actually, you know what? We're going to switch that up. That's not happening. And we're also going to switch this up too. You guys are going to be surprised by this palette. I'm changing my mind with some of these. I think I'm even going to rank this one even higher than where I put it. I don't know why I put it so low. It's still a good palette. So we're going to do that. All right. This palette, again, you guys are probably going to be surprised that this one is ranking so low. And I'm actually wearing this one combined with the first one on my eyes today. And I prefer the first one over this one. I'm not saying that this palette isn't good, because I actually really love the quality of it. But as far as colors, I mean, the color story is also good in here too. But I find that I have to combine other shades with this palette in order to get some looks and some depth out of it. And that's not my favorite thing when it comes to an eyeshadow palette. Like, I want to be able to create a look with just one palette. I'm not the type of person that really does combine palettes too often. I either get a look out of one palette, or it's not really like something that I'm going to reach for as often over a palette that I can get a complete look out of. And I'm talking about like the depth and dimension shades. It's really funny that it used to be where I was all about the shimmers in a palette, and now it's like, am I going to be able to create depth and dimension using just that palette? Am I going to be able to just use that palette? So number 26 is the Colourpop Hocus Pocus 2 palette. Now, I know a lot of people liked this palette a lot, but unfortunately for me, I love the cover art and I love the color story of this, and the shimmers in here really are super stunning, and love the packaging, love the theme. I love these deep dark mattes in here, and these mattes are really good. Honestly, don't have any problem with the mattes in here. They are stunning. They are so easy to work with. Very super pigmented. I love this dark purple, and I love this dark green. And most of the shimmers in here are gorgeous. I really do love them. But the reason why this one's ranking lower is because this purple shade is terrible. It does not adhere to the lid. I can't even get it on my lid. And the thing is that the other palettes that have like mattes that don't really show up, it's not really as upsetting when you have a matte that doesn't work that well, because you can just build it up more. With a shimmer, if it doesn't stick to my lid, it's not good, you know? So this shade, for some reason, is different than the other shimmer formulas in this palette. All these other shimmers are stunning. My favorite shade in here is 17th Century, and it's because it's such a unique color. I can't even describe it. It's so gorgeous on the lid. Like when I put this one on my lid, it just is so stunning. I'm actually wearing Candle is a Light all over my lid today, along with a couple of the other mattes. I'm wearing this matte and this matte, which is Spellbook and Cometh to Us. And I wanted to whip it out again because I hadn't used it in a while, and it's still a good palette. Don't get me wrong. So that one is 17th Century, and it's like a silvery, almost lilac-y type of shimmer. It's so freaking gorgeous. It's also a stunning inner corner highlight. I love this orange and this green, but as far as being inspired to reach for it, I find that I have to dig into some other mattes in order to get a complete look out of this palette. I probably could get more creative and use the other shades in here, like in different color combos, like the green and orange, or like the purple and orange, or the purple and green. Like those would be really fun color combos, and I think I want to dive into that when Halloween rolls around. And with this palette, in my opinion, might change a little bit more. But as far as this shade goes, it's really not that great. But this shade, Candle is a Light, is that super sparkly new formula that they have, and it's stunning. It's kind of like a combo of like a Super Shock and like a super glittery kind of shimmer, and it's gorgeous. So that one is number 25. Cannot believe it's ranking that low. It's a good palette, but everything else after this, honestly, are really amazing palettes from Colourpop, and I would recommend every single one over this palette because of that. But the shimmers in here are stunning, so don't write it off completely if you're a Hocus Pocus fan. So that was number 26, right? Not number 25, right? Okay, number 25. We're just going to keep on going. So number 25 is the Colourpop and Mandalorian The Child palette, and this is one of the Star Wars 9-pans. I really like this palette. This one was the only 9-pan I was super into, and the shimmers in here are absolutely stunning. But the reason why this one is ranking a bit lower than some of the other 9-pans that I'm going to talk about, nothing wrong with the color story. I actually think that this color story is one of their best curated 9-pans. It's just the fact that I really don't reach for it anymore. It mostly is a display palette for me because it's so cute and I love the little child. I think it's adorable. But as far as reaching for this palette, I don't really use it as much as I used to. I did use this palette a ton when I first got it, and I used it more in 2021 than I did last year. I barely used it last year. I actually did whip it out this month and finally used it again. And the formula of this is so good. It's so easy to work with. But as far as reaching for it, oh my God, I feel like this is going to pop out in a second. That's one of the Super Shocks. Some of the Super Shocks just do not stay in the pan. But color story wise, the mattes are so good paired with these shimmers in here. I find that I can create more of a complete look with this palette than I can with the Hocus Pocus 2. Because it has this deep brown, which y'all know I love my deep browns in a palette because that's what I use literally all the time to deepen up looks. And this deep green. And then you have these three mattes that literally work with all the shimmers. It's just such a well-curated palette. And it's so hard to pick a favorite shade because all the shimmers are gorgeous in this palette. I'm really torn between Right Hand Mando and the Force. I think I'm going to do the Force because this is a gorgeous Super Shock shadow. It's really pretty. It's kind of similar to the one... Okay, it's not similar to the one in the Elsa palette. Because it's a lot more bronze. This is the one from the Elsa palette, but they have a very similar texture to each other because they're a little bit more similar in the formula. Because I feel like they change the Super Shock formula like all the time in the palettes. So that one is the Force. It's such a gorgeous like multi-dimensional like goldish greenish color. It's stunning. So really, really good palette. The reason why it's ranking lower, though, is just because I don't really reach for it anymore, but it's still a really, really good palette. So that one is number 25, right? 25, okay. Number 24 is more of a recent palette to me. The reason why this one's ranking lower is just because you can't get this palette anymore, and I think you can't get the next palette either anymore. But these are both really good 9 pans. So number 24 is the In the Limelight palette. I don't know why they decided to discontinue this palette so fast, but I'm really getting stressed if I'm messing up the numbers. So just give me a second. Okay, so we're actually right with the ranking. So this one is number 24. I actually really like this palette. And every time I use this palette, I like it a lot more on my eyes than I do in the pan. And it actually turns out to be a really pretty, like, subtle green look. And I don't understand why they just continue this so quickly. But I feel like this is a great palette for people that want to dip into color and want to start playing with color. And you can really get a beautiful, subtle green look out of this palette. I mean, of course, you can use some of these green shades and you can do like a really pretty like lime green neon eye and like pop one of these shimmers on the lid. These shimmers are stunning. Oh my God, they're so pretty. When I'm telling you that the metallic formula from Colourpop really changed in 2022, like these two are insane on the lid. They're so gorgeous and so wet looking. But I really think that this palette was so well curated. And this one, honestly, I was the most nervous about purchasing, but I heard so many good things about it. I was like, okay, I really want to try it. And this became one of my favorite summer palettes. And I actually just used it a couple of days ago because I really wanted to dip back into it again because I'm trying to, you know, bring out some of my palettes that I haven't used in a while. That's why I used the Hocus Pocus 2 palette today. And this palette's really pretty. So I really love it. I think my favorite shade is the one in the middle called Booked. It is kind of similar to the one from the Lizzie McGuire palette, but it's a lot more pigmented than the Lizzie McGuire one. This one's the Lizzie McGuire one. It probably got a little bit faded. But this one is Booked. Look at that. Look at how pretty that is. Right? I'm so inclined to take this palette when we go to California for my sister's wedding. But there's another palette that's ranked a lot higher that literally is like a California palette that I could just bring with me. Because I'm probably just going to bring Colourpop shadows with me, honestly, because those are the ones I'm going to use the most. But this palette is stunning. I wish you could still get it. And this Star Power shade is so gorgeous because it's like more of like a lime green. It shows up really beautiful on your inner corners. Oh, it's so pretty. The swatch isn't really going to do it justice because when you put it on your inner corners, it kind of has like a very slight green shift to it. It's so gorgeous. So I really, really love this palette. So really solid, but I just don't reach for it as much as the other palettes that I'm going to be talking about, but it's such a good palette. I really, really like this palette. It's really good. But, you know, it's just where it fell. Okay, so number 23, again, is a really good 9-pan palette. And I put off getting this palette for so long, and I honestly was kicking myself because I really, really like it. And number 23 is the Lilac You A Lot palette. This is another 9-pan palette. And I'm not sure if this one is available anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong. Most of the palettes I'm going to be talking about, of course, this one is already falling out of the pan again. I had to repress this shadow because as soon as I got the palette, it fell out of the pan. So I had to completely repress it, but it's such a gorgeous shade. I did not want to not save it because it's such a good shade. So this is what it looks like. I think I can hold it like this because I think it'll stay. But I've had, you know, other shades fall out of the pan from Colourpop before. I think I have to repress one of the other shades in the Sweet Talk palette as well. But this palette is so good, you guys. I mean, some of the looks turn out similar, but I really love the looks that I get out of this palette. It's just such a pretty lilac palette. I really, really like it. The shimmers are great in here, and the mattes are really, really good. My favorite shade in here, I think, is Trainwreck. It's just a stunning, like, super, like, cool tone, lilac-y purple. And again, these, oh, it's so pretty. These swatches aren't going to do it justice, but look at how gorgeous that is. It's like a cool tone, lilac-y purple shimmer, and it's so gorgeous. So yeah, I love this palette. I can't wait to dip into it again during the springtime because that's when I really want to whip it out and use it again. But I used it quite a bit in the summer and the springtime, and I really, really like it. So that one is number 23. Now, number 22, right? 30, 29, 20, 27, 26, 25, 24, 23. Okay, 22. Basically, all of these palettes throughout the next few palettes are all Disney ones except for one. So number 22 is the Star Wars original Colourpop Star Wars palette. This is the first and only 15-pan palette that they've come out with for the Star Wars collection. This one kind of gets a little bit messy, but this is a really pretty palette, you guys. The reason why this one's ranking a bit lower, though, is because I don't love all the shimmers in here. They're really good, but this one, Space Pirate, and this one, Outer Rim, kind of, you know, end up looking more so like a regular shimmer than it does like looking more multi-dimensional. And I was really excited for those two shades to try them because they kind of have that tie-dye effect that they have come out with for their Super Shock shadows in like the single ones that they have. But these two just end up becoming like a swirl of like black and blue or like black and red. So they're okay, but they're not like, they don't really have the same effect on the eyes as you would think they would. But the rest of the shimmers are stunning, really metallic, gorgeous. I love the gold and the silver. Colourpop makes some of my favorite silver and golds. They just know how to do those shades, and they're just always stunning. The reason why this is ranking a bit lower, though, is that I wish that they had a couple more different mattes in here. Like, we didn't need 4 neutral browns, but at the same time, if I want to do a neutral look with this palette, I know I have the neutral shades that I can use in here. And I find when I use this palette, I don't have to dip into any other palette because it has the depth and dimension that I'm looking for. So I think that was smart for them to do that because they're like, well, we want to make this your neutral palette too, so you'll use it a lot more. And I think that's smart. My favorite shade is Jedi Knight. It is such a stunning electric blue turquoise. It's so gorgeous. Not that I wear this that often, but it's such a good blue shade. It's so freaking pretty. Look at all these gorgeous shimmers on my hand. But this one, everybody definitely responded to because there's a lot of old school Star Wars fans out there, including myself. And I think this palette is so fun. This one sold out really fast. I think it sold out in like 2 days, and they took forever to restock it. I don't know why they took forever, but it's such a good palette, and I love that it has a black in here. I love it has a deep blue and the deep red. Just a really good color story. So that one is number 22. I don't know why my dog is barking outside my door. I'm sorry if you hear that. Okay, number 21 is another 9-pan, and this used to be one of my favorite neutral palettes in my entire collection, but since some other neutral palettes that have come out in Colourpop's collection of palettes, this one should be 21, right? Yeah. I'm getting tired because I didn't sleep last night and my back hurts already, even though I just got a massage. But I'm getting tired because I feel more relaxed because I got a massage. So we should be able to get through this pretty quickly though. Number 21 is the Going Coconuts palette. It is another 9-pan, and I cannot believe I'm ranking this one so much lower than I thought. But honestly, since I've gotten this palette, there's a lot of other Colourpop palettes that have wowed me a bit more than this one. I find that the mattes in here are a bit more drier. And also, like, the, format of the plastic, they kind of have a little bit more of a drier formula than the ones in the cardboard, but that is not the case when it comes to the Or Kid You Not or the Wine and Only, and those ones will come up later because I love those two palettes. But the shimmers in here are absolutely stunning. Some of my favorite shimmers ever from Colourpop. These are fantastic shimmers. They're so metallic. My favorite one is the middle shade, which is Cocoa Crush. I've used this one a ton. And there's just so many like multi-glitters in these shades. And it's just freaking stunning. So, and also like this shredded shade actually works on my brow bone. But this has been one of my favorite neutral palettes for years. I'm never going to get rid of it. I just find that there's other palettes that I have tried from Colourpop that I like a lot more than this one. But this one's still a really, really good one. So that one is number 21. Hold on. Yeah, so that one was number 21. I didn't write any of these down. I just ranked them randomly right now, and I just wanted to film the video. So number 20, these are all Disney palettes. So number 20 is the Winnie the Pooh Sweet As Can Be palette. I would like to use this palette more in the springtime. I didn't really get to use it as much as I would have liked to when it first came out, but I would like to dive back into it. This palette is really, really cute. Again, a palette that a lot of people responded to. And this palette sold out in like a week or two. But also a lot of people respond to like the side collections that Colourpop comes out with when it comes to Disney collections. Like a lot of people loved the Tinkerbell collection. A lot of people loved the Winnie the Pooh collection. And I hope they do another spring collection doing that type of Disney theme or side collection like this spring. I don't know what they would do, but I would love to see more of that. The mattes in here are really, really good. Very, very nice. No kick up, not powdery at all. The shimmers are beautiful in here. The only reason why this one's ranking a bit lower than some of my other Disney palettes is because I wish that there was, not that there's not enough depth with the red and the brown, but I kind of wish there would have been like another green matte in here. Like they probably could have taken this pink shade out of here and made it like a green olivey tone matte, like kind of in between the two green shades that are in here, like that kind of tone in here, and then I would have loved it. But I kind of understand why they didn't do that because of the olivey background, but they could have made it like a deep olivey green, and that would have been really, really pretty. Because I think this is the only matte in here that I've never used. I've used all the other shades in here. I've used all the shimmers, and they're gorgeous. My favorite shade is obviously the gold shade, which is Make Believe. The shimmers in here are so gorgeous, and the mattes are really, really good too. But obviously, the shimmers are going to be my favorite shades. I mean, duh, you know I'm a shimmer girl. And that's a gorgeous, gorgeous gold shade. It's just so pretty. And the packaging is so pretty in this. I love that they did a 10-pan format. They don't come out with this format really that often. I think this is the only 10-pan that I own from Colourpop. And it's just such a sleek, nice way to store it. I love the packaging on this. Some of my favorite packaging they've ever done. because I love the 10 pan format. So that one is number 20. And again, the shimmers are gorgeous. I wish that they didn't have both of these green shimmers in here and just replace one of them with like a green olivey toned matte, or they just replace this one. But other than that, really, really good palette. So, and I find that there's enough depth and dimension in this palette with just the burgundy red and the brown shade, because y'all know I only need a brown in a palette to build up some depth and dimension. Okay, so that one is number 20. Okay, number 19 is the Nightmare Before Christmas palette. This is one of the 9-pan palettes. This one is really, really good. I just dropped the box. This one is really, really good. Packaging wise, I love it. And honestly, formula wise, this one impressed me a lot more with the formula than I thought it would. I love that they put like these deeper smoky tones on the top row and then just do a full row of neutrals on the top, and a lot of people appreciated that, but a lot of people were not really jiving with the color story of this. But honestly, the more and more I used it, the more and more I loved this palette, and I think it's really, really good. I'm actually wearing the lipstick from this collection today in Oogie Boogie. This is one of my favorite lipsticks. It's amazing. One of my favorite lipsticks from Colourpop. Hopefully this is my water from today. I'm pretty sure it is, and it's not from yesterday. But it doesn't matter because it would only be like from yesterday anyway. Why am I telling you this? I don't know. The shimmers in here are beautiful. The mattes just are so good in this palette. I love the matte black and this kind of deeper, smoky, grayish color. It actually builds up a lot of depth and dimension, and also the brown. This is a really good palette. Zero is such a gorgeous white shimmer, and this is my favorite shade though, which is Pumpkin Patch, but also this neon orange is amazing. One of the best mattes that they've ever come out with. And then Pumpkin Patch is this gorgeous, gorgeous like tangerine orange. Well, not really tangerine, but like goldish orange. And then that is, what's this? Look at that orange. And this is Pumpkin Patch. So really, really pretty. Really like this palette. And I think this palette did sell out eventually as well. So a lot of people still responded to it. But they could have done a little bit more with this collection. Like if they came out with like a ghost-like looking highlighter like in this color, why don't they come out with more cheek products? I don't understand. Like we don't need a million eye products in every single launch. Like, and then the same thing with the Star Wars collection. Like we need cheek products. I'm sure they'll come out with more Star Wars pieces because they come out with a ton every year. So this one's number 19. Okay, number 18 is another 9-pan. And this is one of my favorite 9-pans they've ever done. And this one is the Frozen 2 Anna palette. This one is ranking a lot higher than the Elsa one because I prefer this color story over the Elsa one. I actually just used this palette a couple of weeks ago. So this one is still in rotation in my collection. And when I used it again, I was like, this palette is so easy to create a color story with and to create a look with, because just the matte selection in this palette is so good because we have like these mustardy neutrals, this deep brown, a deep purple, and a pinky mauve. Really, really good color selection, and the gold is so pretty, and this purpley shade, and then Scooch In is a really unique like duochrome, and then even the pressed glitter is really good in this palette. I really love this palette. It's really good, very, very pigmented, very easy to work with, but I think my favorite shade is the yellow toned shimmer. It's just stunning. I love it. And you guys, again, know I love these kind of shades, but it's such a beautiful metallic shimmer, and I really, really love this palette. So that one is number 18. Cannot wait for Frozen 3. I don't know when that's coming out. Probably not for another couple of years. This one I think came out in like 2019. So it's been like 3 years already, and y'all, I think Frozen 2 was better than the first one because I love the music in Frozen 2. It's so underrated. Okay, number 17. We're getting to the top 15. So number 17 is the Gather Round Sisters Hocus Pocus palette. This one I think is their best Hocus Pocus palette. I think the first one is really, really good. This one is definitely one of my most used palettes in my collection. I used this a ton when it came out. This was my number one most used Colourpop palette in the month of October that it came out, and I think I used it a ton the next Halloween as well. So this is definitely my most used Halloween palette in my entire collection. Just the curation of the mattes were really, really good in this palette. I find that, again, I don't struggle to create looks with this palette as I do with the Hocus Pocus 2. I find that the depth and dimension is here because they have this deep green, this deep red, this deep magenta, this deep black, this deep brown. Really, really good color story. We have these cool tones on this side, and then we have more warmer tones on this side. Like this shade, and this shade, so pretty. The reds are really pretty, and I really love Hello Salem. This one's definitely the one I use the most as like the base shade in my crease, and I have a really big substantial dip in it. And then I love this one as my brow bone highlight. I'm actually wearing that one as my brow bone highlight today. And I'm wearing Wench on my inner corners, and I used On Toast to define the crease a bit more, and then the rest of the shades are from the Hocus Pocus 2 palette. So it was fun whipping out this palette again because I only got to use it once last Halloween last year. So I like using it when I can. I don't really use it that often, but it is a very well-loved palette in my collection. My favorite shade in this palette is Brew Potion. This is one of their best glitter shades. This one has more of a base to it. I can't really describe this formula, but this is my favorite glitter formula from them because it's definitely a lot more pigmented. They have like this kind of shade in the Lust for Dusk palette as well. This one is gorgeous, and I've used that one a ton, and it's definitely my favorite in this palette. It's just gorgeous. So this is definitely my favorite Hocus Pocus palette. I thought the second one was awful. Don't buy that one. I don't understand what they were doing with that. I did not buy that myself. This one is definitely where it's at. And the Hocus Pocus 2 is just a really fun color story. So that one is number 17. Okay, now let's move on to this next pile of palettes. So we're getting to like the creme de la creme of like my favorite palettes from Colourpop. 17. Okay, hold on. Let me just count these real quick. Okay, number 16 is Sweet Talk. I don't really use this one as much anymore because it's one of my older ones. This one is kind of smashed up. I'm going to have to repress this shadow probably right after I finish this video. This is a beautiful palette. You cannot get this from Colourpop anymore, so I'm not going to talk about it too long. But this was one of my most used Colourpop palettes in my collection because I think I added this as like my 4th palette from Colourpop when they were coming out with more palettes back then. My favorite shade is actually the one that's smashed up, which is called Side by Side, is one of the Super Shocks. And it's such a glittery, like gorgeous metallic shade. And it's a really, really beautiful shade. It's super sparkly. Love this palette. I love the depth and dimension in this palette because there's like mustardy tones and pinks and browns. And I actually really love the pressed glitters in here, and I love the pinks in here. So that one is number 16. I'm going to have to repress this one though. Whoopsie. Okay. Let's hurry this up. Number 15. So we're getting to the top 15, you guys. The creme de la creme of my collection. I just want to wipe off some of these swatches so we can swatch all my favorite shades from those palettes. Okay, number 15 is the It's a Princess Thing palette. I love this palette so much, you guys. This is one of my favorite Disney palettes they've ever come out with, and I believe this was their first Disney collab. This one has been beaten up, you guys. One of my most used from Disney and Colourpop. As you guys can see, the shimmers are kind of messed up in the pan because these shimmers are absolutely stunning. I love that you have this neutral row of really beautiful neutral mattes, and then you have this bottom row of like a black and a brown. I love that they put these two shades in here. Y'all know I can use that to deepen up any look, and then these shimmery rosy tone purpley shades are really gorgeous as well. Love this palette so much. I've used this a ton. It's such a good palette. My favorite shade in here, I really love these two, but I think my favorite shade is Ray. I also love One Kiss. But Ray, oh my god, is such a gorgeous like champagne-y color. It is stunning. These shimmers are some of the most blinding shimmers I've ever used from Colourpop. And I just used this palette, I believe, last summer. I mean, I had used this a ton when I first got it. I don't really reach for it as much anymore. But this palette's amazing, and I think it's still available. So if you want to try it, I would still try it while it's still available. It's a phenomenal palette. All these palettes I'm talking about, I 100% recommend for you to try if you've been eyeing them. 15. Okay, number 14 is the chocolate, not a box of chocolates palette. And the 16 pan format is some of my favorite palettes from Colourpop. I think that this palette is beautiful, and I've actually been reaching for it quite a bit this month. Again, this is my most recent palette to my collection, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. I just wish that there was a little bit more depth and dimension in here. I mean, there is a lot of depth and dimension, but I find myself not even using this shade. I wish it was a little bit more mid-tone, actually, because then I would use it a bit more. This one's just a little bit too light for me to use as a brow bone highlight. Oh my god. Let me just knock myself out. I'm getting hungry, you guys, and I'm getting tired. And it's also just a little bit too light for me to use in my crease. My favorite shade is Honeycomb Crunch. It's a gorgeous bronzy tone shimmer. I love it. It's beautiful. This is still such a gorgeous palette. It's such a gorgeous, like, bronzy tone, caramelly, chocolatey palette. Every time I use this, I crave chocolate because the tones they put in here are top notch. I do have a get ready with me with this palette recently if you want to see it in action, but I've been really into like these deep, smokier, kind of neutral shades lately. I went a little bit more mid-toned today, but there's just a little bit of kickback with the pans when you use the mattes. That's the only reason why this one's ranking a bit lower, so it can get a little bit messy, but the shimmers in here are absolutely stunning, and the mattes perform beautifully. This palette was popular for a reason because it's a really, really good palette. So that one is number 14. Okay. Ooh, my stomach is growling like, bitch, you hungry? Okay. Number 13. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Yes, number 13 is the Malibu Barbie palette. I'm not sure if you can get this palette anymore either. I'm pretty sure it's still available if I'm not mistaken. If not, I'm sorry. This palette really impressed me way more than I thought it was going to. This is one of my favorite color stories that they've ever done. I love the blues and the pinks and the yellow and the oranges. It's just such a beautiful summer palette, and the formula in here is bomb. I love the formula of these square panned palettes from Colourpop. I also love the Rudolph one as well. The only reason why this one's ranking a bit lower is because the shimmers do flake in the pan, but once you get them on your eyes, they are stunning. They just get a little bit crumbly in the pan. My favorite shade is this turquoise shade. I love these brightening shimmers up here, and this one is amazing, called Cali Girl, but this turquoise blue is fantastic. And this one is called Surfs Up, and it's a gorgeous pale blue, you guys. Oh my goodness. It's, again, not going to swatch the greatest, but on your eyes, it's a gorgeous poolside blue turquoise shade. It is gorgeous. I probably prefer the one in the Springs palette over this one now. But as far as summer palettes go, this is one of my favorite summer palettes. I reached for it quite a bit this past summer, and I'm planning on using it more this summer as well. I cannot wait. It's also a California palette, so I don't know if I'm going to bring this one with me. But there is one that's ranked even higher that I'm really just thinking about bringing. I might just bring the 2 California palettes, this one, because I have color options in here and in the Springs one, and then I'll be good. So that one is number 13. Okay, number 12. This is my favorite Disney palette from Colourpop, and then from So On and So Forth, they're all regular palettes except for number 1, which is a collab palette as well. But number 12 is my favorite Disney collab they've ever done. They have not been able to top this palette for me. And I think you guys know, if you guys have watched my Disney ranking of all my Disney collab palettes from Colourpop, I have that as well. This one was my number 1 pick, and that is the Midnight Masquerade palette. This palette is fantastic, you guys. This whole collection was my favorite Disney collection they've ever done. Love all the blushes, love all the highlighters, love all the lipsticks, love the eyeshadow palette. I wasn't going to get this palette, and then I was like, girl, you need this. You're a Disney freak. You need this palette. And I'm so glad that I got it because this palette is stunning. I cannot even pick a favorite shade in this palette because they're all phenomenal. Phenomenal shimmers in this palette. The green's amazing. Love this row of shimmers. Again, love this row of deepening mattes. I love that they put them in there. I love the blue. I love the red. And then these mid-toned crease shades, they didn't do too many repetitive colors. So they really, really work with this palette. So my favorite shade, oh my God, they're all gorgeous. They really do gorgeous Princess and the Frog shades. And these are stunning. I love the Princess and the Frog shades in the It's a Princess thing as well. Maybe I should just do my top 10 in a separate video. I think I'm going to do that because this is getting way too long. I might just say my top 10 favorites in part 2 because I feel like I'm rushing through this video. I think I'm going to do that. And also I'm getting hungry, so there's that too. Let me just keep on debating. So yeah, Frog and Wife and Mama Odie and Mrs. Potts are all phenomenal. This one is Frog and Wife. This one is Mama Odie. And this one is Mrs. Potts. Oh my God, Mrs. Potts is such a gorgeous yellow gold. So those are the 3 shades, Frog and Wife, Mama Odie, and Mrs. Potts. They're all gorgeous. And I love all of them so much. So yeah, phenomenal palette. Love this palette. I think you can still get it. So if you guys, again, want this palette, it's still available. I cannot believe this is still available. I think all the cheek products were discontinued, but the palette is still available. And this palette's absolutely amazing. Okay, number 11 is really funny that it's falling here because it literally fell in the same spot when I was talking about all the palettes that I tried last year in 2022, and I ranked my Colourpop palettes with my all the other brands that I tried last year because I didn't try as many palettes from Colourpop in 2022 as I did in 2021. Oh my God, I can't speak anymore because I'm hungry. So number 11 is the Nude Mood palette, and this little palette, you guys, really did impress me. I think this palette is awesome. And I think it's one of their best 9-pan palettes. There are a couple that are ranked a little bit higher, but I don't think I'm going to talk about those now because, again, I'm getting hungry. I'll just film another ranking at the top 10 when I'm wearing another Colourpop palette on my eyes. We will see. Probably the number 1 pick is what I'm going to be wearing in that video. So this palette is amazing. Love the mattes in here. Really, really good. Love the shimmers. This was the other palette that I was thinking about taking to California with me because it has all my neutral options in here. And I love this palette because it's just such an easy palette to use. And again, these shimmer shades are so sparkly and gorgeous. I love that there's a matte brown bone highlight in here. This deepening brown and deepening like mid-tone brown are really good, and I love these 2 shades. These actually work in my crease. This one is even a good crease shade for me as well. Better than the one that's in the Not a Box of Chocolates palette. My favorite shade is Wink Wink. Oh, it's so sparkly and beautiful. I love it so much. It's so gorgeous, and it just sparkles on your eyes, and it's just phenomenal. I think that is a Super Shock as well. Look at that. Isn't that blinding? So yeah, love this palette. Highly recommend it if you guys are looking for an affordable neutral palette. I love this one way more than the Going Coconuts now. I cannot believe this one is ranking so much higher, but I think that the matte formula in here is definitely not as dry as the one in the Going Coconuts. It's still a really good palette, and I could still get really good looks out of it, but this palette is really, really good, you guys, and I love it, and it's just such a good palette. So yeah, that is my first half of ranking all my Colourpop palettes in my current collection. I didn't really want to make this video too long because it's definitely going to be too long after this if I decide to continue it. It's going to be like over an hour, so I think I'm going to save my top 10 for part 2. So I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on my Instagram at CBW819 and check out my Poshmark at the same handle. Let me know what your favorite Colourpop palettes are in your collection. Have you tried any of these palettes? Do you even like Colourpop anymore? Let me know. I'm a nosy bitch and I would love to know. So I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. And put your picks for or your guesses in the comments below of what you think my favorites are. Let's see if you guys know. All right, bye.